I've been talking about Aaron Donald, how I think he's underrated, and I love having that defensive tackle, nose tackle. He disrupts everything up the middle, and Aaron Donald certainly did that. We ran down some other names in NFL history. I know edge rushers get a lot of attention, certainly cornerbacks, but that guy up the middle, that just changes everything. And lo and behold, Fritzy reaches out to Trevor Sikkema, the Pro Football Focus lead draft analyst, host of NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Help me understand the metrics for Pro Football Focus on the most valuable. If I put Aaron Donald and I said T.J. Watt, like how do you equate the value of Aaron Donald to T.J. Watt or another edge rusher, Myles Garrett?
Yeah, so we have a model over at PFF.com, and it's called wins above average, wins above replacement, whatever you want to call it. And actually, it's available for our team clients to be able to use. It's not a PFF Plus product that we have there. And honestly, it's because a lot of stuff goes into it. And the question that you asked is, it's a tough one, right? I mean, I think in baseball, a lot of people will reference wins above average, wins above replacement, that kind of stuff. And it's a little bit easier because a lot of the stats are a little bit more common. We're viewing things on a little bit more of an equal playing field, especially when it comes to offense. But in the NFL, it's different, and it really is a total team game, and it is tough to individualize those certain performances. But with the model that we have, we get to take things into account like PFF grades, which of course grade every single player on every single play, which kind of tell us how well a player is executing their job. And then we're able to give a little bit of value to that with the rise in popularity and perfection of the EPA per play, EPA per rush, those kinds of metrics. So now all of a sudden you have stats or grades, data points, I should say, that allow you to grade performance. And then we also have a data point that gives you a little bit of an idea for value. And so going back to your question of like, hey, Aaron Donald versus TJ Watt versus Myles Garrett, it all kind of comes down to how a individual player is making an individual play, and necessarily not only how much are they leaned upon just themselves on an island, if you will, but also does doing their job either at a net zero level or a positive or a negative level, how much that actually impacts the football game. And so we have our own wins above average metric, which a lot of those things sort of get into it, and we can get into that a little bit deeper for as much as I can. I didn't invent the metric myself. I just kind of know it pretty well from everything that we do. But it is that way where we take a total team game and try to give these guys individual value. And just to what you were talking about Aaron Donald before, it felt like he was breaking our wins above average model sometimes with how much he was able to impact the game at his high of a level. But we have to take that into account when we do stuff like that.
Least valuable defensive position is what?
I would say the least valuable is often linebacker, because the word replacement or average does a lot of the heavy lifting for this formula. When you get linebackers, of course, like Fred Warner is at the very top of the list, and it's because of what he can do in coverage as a run defender, as a pass rusher. He does all of those things, but there are so many linebackers that don't have that capability to give you those plus grades, and maybe more important, just those even grades of not screwing up his job the way that Fred Warner does that with a high floor and a high ceiling. So a guy like that will have a wins above average that is a little bit closer to, normal interior defenders, some edge rushers, guys like that. But there's a lot of linebackers that it gets a lot lower to that 0.0 wins above average number the further you go down from Fred Warner, and it doesn't take you long to get to that point. So I think that the most valuable linebackers in the league still hold that word, a ton of value themselves, but there's just a lot of guys that, much like the running back position, the more replaceable you are, the more close to average you are, the less value you're going to hold like that.
If the Bengals ask you, and Pro Football Focus, if they should give Trey Hendrickson a 3-year deal or just give him a 1-year deal and let him walk, what would Pro Football Focus tell the Bengals?
Yeah, I think that it comes down to sort of exactly what the conversation ended up being between these two parties, and that is he's, I believe, 30 right now or about to turn 31. what does his performance look like in 2026 and 2027? Where is that drop off there? And, it's a little bit of a different metric. I don't know, if we have something out there for necessarily like age decline, but I can tell you from a wins above average standpoint, the only edge rusher that we had in our system that was more valuable than Trey Hendrickson, who led the NFL in pressures last year, was Myles Garrett. And the reason why Myles Garrett was a little bit higher is simply because he was better as a run defender, but Trey was doing his job extremely well. And I would stack that up with the rest of the team there with the Bengals. You're not just looking at what Trey Hendrickson is versus the rest of the league. Of course, that goes into the overall number of what you're discussing with the contract, but it also goes into who else do you have on your team? Because if you look at the Bengals, the three players that are higher in wins above average are the three that you would expect. It's T. Higgins, it's Jamar Chase, and of course, it's Joe Burrow. But after that, it's Trey Hendrickson, and then, the next guy on the team is much, much lower. So I would certainly tell the Bengals, like, hey, if you want to compete for a Super Bowl, if you want to compete in what is maybe the toughest division in the NFL, you probably cannot do it with this guy, and you're not going to be able to replace him in the aggregate.
Trevor Sikkema, the Pro Football Focus lead NFL draft analyst, co-host of NFL Stock Exchange podcast. For a guy who won the Heisman and is coming in and maybe playing both ways, there is little conversation about Travis Hunter, which I find remarkable. Has Pro Football Focus looked at what's more valuable, an all-pro cornerback or an all-pro wide receiver with Travis Hunter?
So these guys it is pretty close between those because, as we were putting together, and again, I wasn't in the beginning stages of this. I've just done a lot of reading up on it and had conversations with a lot of people who kind of came up with this metric for us. What we realized is that wins above average and wins above replacement in the game of football gets a lot higher the further you are away from the ball, actually, because normally you have less help. Right? I mean, like when you're closer to the ball, if you're in the box, as an interior defensive lineman or a linebacker, and even sometimes edge rushers, you have a lot of help next to you. But when you get all the way out to the sideline and it's a corner and a wide receiver, you're on an island. It's all about your individual skills. How can you get open? How can you not let a receiver get open? And what we have figured out is that some years it can flip, right? Some years the highest wins above average wide receiver like a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson can be a little bit higher. But last year, for example, it was Patrick Surtain. He was the highest graded defender that we had from a wins above average standpoint. He ends up winning Defensive Player of the Year, and it's just because of exactly what he's able to do. You can stick him on an island against the other team's best playmaker in the passing game, and he can totally take him away. That is unbelievably valuable from an individual standpoint in a team game. So it is sort of close, but to answer your question, I think that for the most part, if you are a true top tier, top 5 corner, that is going to be more valuable than even the top wide receivers because, again, we get back to scarcity. There's a lot of wide receivers who can do it at a very high level. There's not a ton of corners that you can go out there and tell them to play cat coverage, say, hey, you go cover that cat, make sure he doesn't catch the football. The top ones do, and our numbers reflect that type of scarcity and that value. So that's why I was a big proponent of Travis Hunter being a corner in the NFL and understanding that if you wanted to get benefit of the both sides of the ball with him, you'd probably have to, play him a little bit differently. But I always said you can play him full-time at corner, get maximum value there, and then moonlight him a little bit as a wide receiver and sort of get that value there. You can't do the opposite. You can't have a guy play full-time at wide receiver and then say, hey, go play a couple of plays at corner, or at least it's really damn difficult to do that. So that's why I was a big proponent of him playing cornerback because our wins above average model sort of spoke to that value there.
Does Pro Football Focus have Hall of Fame grades?
I don't know if we do. Our data goes back to 2006. And I know that every year we kind of try to take the data a little bit further, like we'll watch a bunch of the season for 05, 04, all those kinds of things. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we have a specific Hall of Fame grades for all those guys that are in the Hall.
Yeah, well, even those who could get in the Hall of Fame. Like pending Hall of Famers.
Yes, we definitely would. If certainly if they're recent guys. Yes,
like
absolutely.
Russell Wilson. Is Russell Wilson, by your metrics, already a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I mean that's That is a great question. I wouldn't be able to answer off the top of my head, but I do know that Russell has a ton of value. Again, like I know that just from off the top of my head, if you were making a case for Russell Wilson to make the Hall of Fame, his wins above average numbers, I think, would really help him in that case. Like I really do. I think it's a great case study. It's a great, you might have just given me a future article to write over at pff.com. They're looking at some of those guys who are active players and might have a Hall of Fame case. But I do know off the top of my head that would be a metric that would help him, because I've seen him at the very top of that list a handful of times.
Great to talk to you. We'll talk to you during the season. Thank you, Trevor.
Appreciate it, DP. Anytime. Trevor
Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, the lead NFL draft analyst. They got all of this information, all this data, and they probably won Patrick Surtain the Defensive Player of the Year when you think about all the data that they had and, the wins above replacement. Because if you watch Denver, like sometimes watching a defensive back, there's nothing to watch. If they're that good, you're probably not going in their direction. An edge rusher has a chance to make an impact. You can see him. You may just stay away from the left side of the field with Patrick Surtain.